Bismillah, in alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Muslim Geordie podcast. This was previously known as The Late Show, but alhamdulillah, this year we've changed it slightly. The Muslim Geordie podcast will be running on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night throughout the month of Ramadan from midnight onwards, inshallah. So we've got a lineup and a half for you guys, a complete schedule of programs with different guests. And this is going to be an ongoing thing, inshallah. So make sure that you tune in to Newcastle Fast FM. All the links are down below. Just make sure that you subscribe, like, and share this podcast, inshallah. So let's get straight to it. This is your host, Abu Tayyib, and I'm going to be with you for this particular show. Today's guest, I've got an interesting guest for you all today, inshallah. I've got brother Zubair Adamjee from Canada. Assalamu alaikum, Zubair.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you doing, my brother?
I'm good. Or should I call you Coach Zubair?
Just Zubair. That's it. No titles.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So, I'm really, really proud to invite my friend, my guest, my brother in Islam from Canada, from Toronto, all the way from Toronto to the first program, inshallah, of this series. Zubair, how are you doing, man? What's the latest? How's Ramadan been going for you?
Alhamdulillah, it's been going well. Alhamdulillah, we were actually blessed to have masajid open so far. Just basically a few hours ago, the news started coming out that will be changing from Monday night. But alhamdulillah, we got a first full week of Taraweeh and Jumu'ah and all the other salawat. So that has been a lot of success compared to last year. Things will be different Monday onwards, but alhamdulillah.
What's changing on Monday? What they're saying?
So now basically up until Monday, it was about 15% capacity of masajid, but from Monday onwards, it will go back to the lockdown status, which was like 10 people at most.
Why is that? Has the rate of infection increased again?
Yes, subhanAllah, the cases have been really rising up, even though vaccination have been started and whatnot, but the cases have been rising up, and actually the hospitals are really struggling to maintain that.
Subhanallah. May Allah make it easy for all the Muslims around the world and all of humanity. So are you still leading the Salah in Abu Huraira?
I'm a backup of the backup, so yeah, so I don't have to do that anymore. If we go in the lockdown status, then yeah, perhaps I'll have to step in.
Okay, good. So let's introduce you, Brother Zubair. Let's introduce you to the audience. Let's let people find out a little bit about you first before we get into our topic about Muslim success and how should we grow as Muslims. I think it's an important topic. I think it's something that people are really going to benefit from, inshallah, because you've got a lot of experience on this as a life coach, as somebody who supports Muslims and non-Muslims, giving them da'wah and supporting new Muslims in their journey in Islam. I'm really keen to delve into some of your techniques and skills and things that you have to offer. Before that, let's introduce Coach Zubair. Tell us a little bit about your background, brother. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're up to.
Sure. So I think if you go back from college and university life, it was more about like technical, just like I was a geek, learning computer science, cybersecurity, and so on and so forth. I started working as a developer, and right now I still do cybersecurity with Microsoft at the moment. I think at that time, knowledge and seeking knowledge was quite popular back in the days. I'm talking about almost 10 years ago. It is now much more of a YouTube generation or Instagram or TikTok generation, like really, really bite-sized. But I think back then it was relatively more popular than what it is today. And I think just going through different courses and programs, one of the things that I realized, alhamdulillah, was that even because there was this shift, right? Hey, if either I can be, a professional having a 9-to-5 job, or I have to basically, pack that all up and go and seek knowledge and be a full-time da'i. So alhamdulillah, I had this idea and motivation to kind of balance it out. And I realized that there is a lot more time that is available. And I started doing some different forms of da'wah. I started with something was Quranic Arabic. That was my favorite thing. And I think that's really a life changer. So you may be aware of different programs like Al Huda, Bayyina did a pretty good job as well. So I started doing that, helping people understand Quran in Arabic, word by word and verse by verse, and the Arabic grammar, things like that. And then got exposed to IERA, and also like having different conversations at work as well. So I think talking about dawah, just being connected with different people that you see day in and day out. And if you start a conversation with them about dawah, I think that has much more better results than just like someone random on the street. So anyway, so I kind of got exposed to that, and then got into dawah training, and then from there I realized, well, okay, now you have the dawah training and you're doing dawah, but then what's happening after the shahada, right? And then kind of took me into a New Muslim Support or New Muslim Success, and that kind of also brought in the coaching element of that.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, let's rewind a little bit. Yeah, you said that back in the days. Are we talking about the 90s here? We talking about the 90s in particular, that decade?
No, I would say like mid 2000s. Yeah.
When you were studying and for your professional career, as well as trying to balance it with your Islamic career.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yes, I started my Islamic after my university, essentially. But yeah, that was like mid 2005-06.
It's interesting because there's a big discussion about when people want to go down this route. It's a historical one that people talk about. They talk about, well, you either go into your secular studies or you go into Islamic studies. It's usually one or the other. You don't normally get the mindset was all that you're going to become a doctor, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be a whatever, or you're going to be an imam or a student of knowledge. You normally pick one or the other. But what you've managed to do, which is quite interesting, is balance the two together. Have your professional career in your sort of secular studies, if you like, but also progress in your Islamic studies. Now, I remember this. The reason why I say this is because I had that crossroads in the 90s when I was going to go to university. Shall I apply to Medina University or the local university that I was going to study at? And it was like, how can you balance the two? It was either one or the other, usually, right? And so it's a dilemma that most people have. But what people don't realize is actually you don't have to go away abroad to study Islam. If you really want to learn Islam and study it to a higher degree, if you like, you can do it no matter where you are in the world. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just the realization of that, right? That we do have a lot of resources. Alhamdulillah, personally speaking, like there have been obviously a lot of things that were easier for me, like from an environment perspective, being able to work from home, close to masjid and all that. So all that sort of stuff adds up, but people can obviously optimize their environment and situation for different goals. And subhanAllah, we do see people doing that, right? I mean, the people who are into entrepreneurship or startups, they have this culture of like 9 to 5 and then 5 to 9, right? So there is a 5 to 9 life that's happening regardless. So either you're going to be putting it into some sort of good use, or you'll be talking about other people or other organization, or you can, optimize that and use it in a beneficial way, inshallah.
That's very true. I think a lot of it comes, and don't get me wrong, when I was saying earlier, it's, to go abroad to study, to seek knowledge is a noble thing. If somebody is able to do that, Absolutely. To go to a prestigious university, an Islamic university, we're always going to encourage that. When you sit with the scholars, when you benefit directly from the scholars. But the issue is not everybody can do that. That's the point here. So if somebody's not able to do that, then they can, as you rightly mentioned, you've got some time, even when you are studying or working here in a Western country, for example, you still have the ability to use your time wisely. I think that's the key thing here, Zubair, is our productivity and our usage of time. Because when people say to me, oh, I don't have enough time, I can't study, or I can't go and learn this, or I can't, do whatever, I don't really buy that as an excuse personally. And simply the reason why is because it's not that you don't have time. Time is there. It's that you haven't prioritized your time properly. I think that's the issue here. What do you think about that, Zubair?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think having that sort of prioritization, and I think also the discipline component, right, which is obviously right up what we have for Ramadan, right? Just having that sort of discipline, because obviously, we have the nafs the soul will be inclined to, ease or comfort or chilling or what have you. So you definitely need that sort of discipline element. But I think you could add the passion with discipline, right? So this notion of, well, you're not able to go and seek knowledge abroad. I would probably also say, well, maybe you are even able to, but let's just be honest, maybe you don't want to, right? There are other interests that you have, and it's okay just to be honest and know, okay, look, this is what I really like to do, and maybe you don't like to memorize Quran and sit down and memorize Hadith, which is like great reward, but like being honest about it as well is very important. That would help you to maintain how much discipline you need to do, right? I mean, the harder the thing is, the harder discipline or the higher discipline that will be required. But obviously, the reward will be higher. But like just knowing yourself is also very important.
Absolutely, and I think this is the issue here, that we need to learn how to prioritize. And it's an interesting concept, because when you look at and it's an interesting point that you mentioned there. We always look for ease. It's easy to sit on a sofa and watch Netflix. It's easy to watch a movie. People will watch a movie for an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe even binge a series 3-4 hours in an evening. And that's time there that you've decided to use in something where you could have used maybe more productively, or something toward your deen, or something towards a charity, or something that you could utilize for a better cause, basically, to improve yourself and progress yourself.
True.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that people need to reflect upon and think about. It's about, what are you prioritizing for your time? Okay, let me reminisce. Let me go back, because I know that you're linked with the Abu Huraira Center, and although I've never been there, although I've never been to the masjid physically itself, I have an affinity with that masjid, believe it or not, because back in the 90s, when we were listening to tapes and CDs later on, right, of different lectures and talks and things like that, I remember we used to have imported from Canada different talks, lectures, because Abu Huraira Center has always been, in my eyes, an extremely active masjid and da'wah center. Absolutely. Historically, it's always been like that. So tell us a little bit about Abu Huraira Center, a bit about its history, and what your link is to the Abu Huraira Center.
Right. Yeah. So I think, likewise. So I think when I started becoming more serious about the deen, right, I got exposed to Abu Huraira Center, and then, obviously nearby you have Quran and Sunnah Society, right, so which were both very close. And then, I got first exposed to Quran and Sunnah Society, and then, because you would have some students coming there and also going to Abu Huraira Center, and obviously they would have much better programming for Ramadan and whatnot, which is obviously usually a very a transformative time, right, with the Taraweeh and the Quran and all that sort of experience. And so that was my initial connection. And then I think continuing on, they always sort of had a strong focus on Sunnah and a strong focus on knowledge, right? So they would always try to have different events happening, conferences happening, and which are very, inspiring, and those are very good initial triggers to have that sort of initiatives and so on and so forth. And alhamdulillah, I think, so from initial days of learning, and then as well as having what you would call sponsors or senior du'as to support you in terms of even getting active in da'wah, whether it be salah or the Quranic Arabic program that I was talking about. I mean, subhanAllah, I got connected with Sheikh Bilal Phillips via that masjid, because he was an imam there for a few months, almost half a year, and what have you. And that kind of so alhamdulillah, especially for me, I think it's been very blessed to have those sort of, a platform to learn and also be able to contribute. And similarly, based on what I've seen, many people that come in and, just having different programs and environments to learn. At the same time, obviously, they also have this other side where, it's not a very knowledge focused side, but more of youth development and, having basketball programs and camping and things like that. Just like many major centers would have. So having that sort of component definitely helps as well.
No, I have to say that both QSS and Abu Huraira Center did have an impact on, especially from a knowledge perspective, because they used to have, like you mentioned, conferences. They would invite the ulama, the mashayikh from Jordan and the different parts of the world. And I used to trickle down to us. It sounds weird. I know in the UK we used to benefit from knowledge that came from Canada, but it actually did have an impact on us in the 90s, that's for sure. And then of course over into the early 2000s. But then we sort of lost track. We didn't hear much happening for a while, and then it started picking up again. And there's a lot more. Seems like there's a lot more activities happening again. Inshallah, probably still was, but we just didn't hear about it. There's a good question here, Zubair, about what would you say is a good way to maximize productivity in Ramadan?
I guess there are many different ways, right? So I think if you were to take like a deeper dive into that sort of question, I think first of all it starts with just knowing what you want, right? And sometimes what you want could also be to know what you actually want, right? So sometimes someone can have this sort of thing. Okay, I don't know what I want to do in life, for example, right? And knowing that and having that sort of clarity that I want to be able to figure out by the end of Ramadan what I'm doing, I think that is very important. Similarly, if you already know, okay, I want to start my own business, I want to start my dawah center, whatever. So if you know what you want, or you don't know what you want, but you actually know that I want to get to know what I want, I think that could be a really good trigger. Because if you have a concern, and knowing that this is such a great time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can not only facilitate that, the worldly success as well as the hereafter success, it's going to be a really big motivator, right? And I've seen like people, especially who have a concern and they have this sort of zeal that, okay, I want to make dua. You would see them that they are like taking advantage of all the different opportunities to make dua. They would be reading more Quran, they would be making more dua, and so on and so forth. So I think having a concern, a worry, a good worry is definitely a very important thing. Obviously, if the worry is of the hereafter, right, as we know from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whoever makes the akhirah is concerned, then it's much better, right? You have like so many blessings of that. But if it's like, even if it's something of this dunya, right, and we know from the companions of the Allah anhum that they would even ask for small things. So I think having this desire is what really helps us be humble in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that causes more of servitude and more of submission. So I think that's just the one quick thing. And then second thing is obviously having some sort of a plan, right? That, okay, I want to achieve something. On that front, I think, because obviously you see this notion of quality versus quantity. That's a very commonly mentioned, that, okay, you know what, not just focus on quantity, but also try to improve quality. I think another way of looking at it, it can also be quantity, but not necessarily from the number of pages or number of rakats perspective, but it could be quantity of time, right? So for example, just like we have this quantity, let's say from 5 to 8, we are not eating and drinking. So that's a quantity of time, right? You have kind of restricted yourself from certain activities and not being able to eat and drink. Similarly, you could have, chunks of time where it's like, hey, you know what? From this time to this time, I'm disconnected from social media and phone and what have you, and I'm only going to be sitting with, let's say, Quran, right? So you're not talking about I'm going to be reading 10 pages, but these 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 20 minutes are for, let's say, Quran, or for seeking knowledge, or for whatever. Right? And I think this is something that's really, really helpful for us, especially in this time and age, because we have a lot of, a lot of engaging things that really, captivate our attention. So being able to do the fasting from those things and block out those things and, focus on something that's important and, valuable, I think that's something really important.
What would you say is your Ramadan goals? What's your Ramadan goals for this month, bro?
To be honest, I don't really have any high lofty goals that I would be able to inspire people by. So yeah, I don't know if that's something good to put it out there.
All
How
right,
about you?
enough.
Let me put you on the stand.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, look, for me, it depends. Just for this question, is a good way to maximize productivity. Depends what you define as productivity. What are you wanting to be productive about, right? For me, it's a simple thing for me. In Ramadan, I just want to read as much Quran as I can. That's my goal, right? Any opportunity that I can, how do I maximize my productivity with the Quran? Because we're going to be busy. Look, my view is very simple. We're going to be busy. We're going to work. We're going to, spend time doing whatever we're going to do all year round. Even in Ramadan, we're going to do that stuff. But how do I get as much connection and recitation of the Quran that I wouldn't normally get? That's my goal. It's as simple as that. It's nothing major, but it's just as simple as, how do I connect with the Quran as much as I can? How do I get in the good habits of reciting even 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 20 minutes here, maybe spend a good solid hour if I can there. And things like it's for me, it's like, how can I put it? When you're waiting, sometimes I'm waiting for my kids, right? So we're going to pray together and I'm waiting for them to come. The one's gone to do wudu, one's gone done this, one's doing that. I'll just pick up the mushaf and read a few ayat, just recite a few ayat until everybody's there, and then we can start doing something. Or even for iftar or dinner time or whatever it might be, just spend a little bit of time with the Quran, just recite. Even if it's a few ayat, it's better than nothing. And what you'll find is, so I don't actually have like one of those planned, everyone has their little checklists and stuff like that. I don't actually use that. I just go with the flow most of the time. I know what I want in my head, but I'll go with the flow. And then what I find is actually quite productive for me. But that's just me. I'm more of a freestyle type of person like that. So yeah, that's my goal, I guess, just to read as much as I can. So Sister Salma here has put, same, I want to read as much Quran as I can and learn more surahs and try to memorize it. Excellent. I wish I could spend more time memorizing, but at this stage, I'm just trying to read as much as I can. And then hopefully the plan is, you develop enough habits during this month that when Ramadan's over, I'm still going to be continuing that for the next 11 months type thing. So that's my perspective on it, Zubair.
Right. And I think one thing that's really beautiful about it is that you have like one thing, right? And I think that can be really helpful as well, right? Because if you just have one thing, right, look, you know what, that's my goal, right? And then it's just like, it becomes like a really, I think, relatively easy because you're not thinking, right? It's just like, as you said, whenever you have a moment, I'm going to connect with Quran, right? And that's it. Like, so, and this is what we kind of do, like, when we are on dinner tables or what have you, and, we have a minute and the food is not there. Okay, let me just check Instagram or check my email, or if you're into investment, let me check my what's going on with my portfolio, whatever, right? But if you have this one thing and you have like one, and everybody has this thing, right? I mean, subhanAllah, sometimes you see this like at what you would see, like people just coming in and the kids, the youth, as they're walking out of the salah, right, and they're walking out of the door, they're jumping, trying to hit the wall, right, practicing their dunk. Right, because that's their focus, right? So even from the musalla to their car, they will do like two practice, right? Obviously, it's going to get them better with their physique and momentum and whatnot. But just having something like a concern, I think that's beautiful. Absolutely.
I think it's just focus, isn't it? Trying to be focused, because you know what, the reality is we're so swamped with so many things going on in our lives, whether it's family, work, dawah, this, that, and the other. There's so many things going on, and sometimes you just need to focus it a little bit. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not the best at it, and it's not something that is I'm doing anything amazing. But this is something that we learned from the Salaf as well, that they would focus just on the Quran in this month of Ramadan. They would stop a lot of their activities and focus it. Obviously, it's not so easy to do. Just stopping work and stopping this, it's not as easy as that. But the point is, when you have some form of focus, you can at least make some small steps, small progress. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what productivity is, where you make that small progress. The same in when I used to do bodybuilding. I still do to some extent, right? But not as much as I used to. In bodybuilding, it's the same thing. When you want to build muscle, you're looking to increase your weight incrementally and the volume with it, so that you can build your muscles, cause the micro tears and so on and so forth, and then have the protein to build it, and then your muscle grows. But the point is, it's that slow progress, where you have that incremental, you're increasing it slowly. The same applies for our deen as well. And this is something that I'm really keen to touch upon with you about, how do we, because the topic is Muslim success, how do we become productive? How do we develop? How do we grow as Muslims? And this is something that I'm sure we're going to get into. But let me just read this quick comment out. Me too, mashallah. Whenever I'm on my way somewhere, even bring my daughter to school, we're always reciting together. Then whenever I just found a moment where I'm able to recite Quran, mashallah, that's beautiful. If people could do that, just reconnect with the Quran in any which way they can, I'm sure that we as an ummah, as a community, we're going to grow. We're going to grow from that. But let's talk a little bit about that, Zubair. When we talk about Muslim success, what are we talking about here? What do you mean by Muslim success?
Yeah. So okay, so there are different elements to it. Like, let's just like pick up on what we were already talking about. I think the progress is really a key word, right? Because and there's a reason I'm saying this. So what happens is, and I think also just going back on the topic of Quran, perhaps we have some listeners who may not find, again, they may everyone will have different appetites, right? In terms of like when you start seeing that, look, I'm not enjoying this experience anymore. It's also important to have like some sort of diversification and do something else, right? So for example, if you can't do like let's say an hour and a half of Taraweeh, right? Or it's better for you to then volunteer, let's say in the masjid or food bank, or distributing food or doing something of khair, as opposed to not praying Taraweeh and just like chilling at a coffee shop or what have you. So I think that element is also very important, that where you realize that, okay, this is where I am today. And maybe before Ramadan I was not reading Quran at all. So, and maybe I can't get to like 2 hours of Quran or 1 hour of Quran, what have you. Maybe let me just do like 5-10 minutes, but then let me also replace some of the other things that I was doing, whether it be Netflix or what have you, with something productive. But now when you have established that, and I think this is one of the key things that is a big pet peeve of mine, because you see, like, alhamdulillah, we have people in da'wah that we have seen in the last 5 years or 6 years. I mean, I'm actually seeing, mashallah, a lot of improvement in UK, right? Where you see people kind of started as Instagram personalities or what have you, and now they are actually growing, from what's apparent, and Allah knows what's internal, we don't judge on that, but what's apparent, you can see that they are growing. But at the same time, I do have people that, they're still watching the same videos that they were watching 5 years ago. They're still talking about the same videos, same ideas, right? So there's no growth. So that's just something also important, that, sometimes we just say, oh, we are busy and I'm doing this and I'm watching this video, and I'm watching these shows and whatever and commenting on that. Yeah, that's good for that year 1 or year 2, but you probably don't want to be doing the same thing in year 5 and year 6, right? You want to, like, to have that sort of growth, whether it be from music to nasheed to Quran, right? Or from da'wah or debates to actually learning and then doing the da'wah, right? Taking action about it and increasing your actual ibadah and your own worship and so on. So I think that's one key thing, having that sort of growth, right? So whenever you look at it, whether it be Ramadan to Ramadan, or even if you use the December holidays time frame, like look at it, like what was I engaged in 2019 or 2020, and am I going to be doing the same things? Am I growing? And not just growing for the sake of growing, but like actually like meaningful growth. So that would be one of the things.
Definitely. And I think the reason why I asked you the question earlier, Zubair, is what are your Ramadan goals? Everybody should have a goal that they're working towards. You can't just go in blind, right? Because you can't just say, well, I'm just going to do this and see where it goes. You can do that, but is it the most efficient way of doing things? Is it the most productive way of doing things? I don't know. I think you need to have something that you work towards, whether it's, some people have body goals that they want to work towards. Some people have studying goals. Some people have whatever the goals might be. Have something that you want to work towards, and then slowly you'll find that it becomes easier to focus your efforts like that, inshallah. Yeah, but I don't know. That's just some little things that I've learned. We've got another comment here from, I'm a revert, alhamdulillah, and I'm still learning how to read the Quran and understand it, specifically the whole messages in it, inshallah. Look, the advice is the same, be focused, you'll get there. Just keep trying, be consistent, and have a good teacher, and inshallah you'll get there exactly where you need to be. Ahmed Al-Utaybi, it's the intention is the key. Yeah, absolutely. That's where everything starts, doesn't it? With the intention. You're going to make the intention for something, and you're going to have those goals. And then you got to work towards those goals and make that progress consistently. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? What was the? I'm paraphrasing this, of course, yeah. But do actions, but make them small actions, but make them consistent, right? So we have to, make sure that we have the ideas what we want to do, no matter what it is in life, whether it's Islamic goals, whether it's secular goals, whatever the situation might be. Maybe you want to expand a little bit about that, Zubair.
Yes, absolutely. So I think so. Also, like just to keep things. So what we've talked about so far, like we spoke about the growth earlier, right? Having that sort of growth, and I think what you mentioned is focus, right? So focus is very important, because if you have like 10 or 20 things going on, you may not be able to like give enough attention to anything that you're doing. And I think at the same time, like I am one of those people who would like to have diversification, right? So meaning that I like to have maybe like 3 or 5 projects going on, but everybody is different, right? You need to see what's good for you. Like for some 3 is good, for some 5 is good. For some other people, it's like, okay, I can just only focus on one project or one goal. And I think that's also very important, just to know like what would keep you going, what would keep you passionate and motivated and excited to wake up and excited to move on. So that's the thing, like growth, and then you have focus. And then the third thing, subhanAllah, you just mentioned, the hadith, right? If I'm not mistaken, khairul a'mali adwamuha wa in qal, right? So the best of the deeds are the ones that are consistent and ongoing, even if they're little, right? So that's the third element, right? Having something that's consistent, and I think that can definitely make you go like a really, really long way, right? So and that's also the topic of habits, right? So habits are obviously very, very important, like from a productivity and personal development perspective, and obviously Ramadan helps us with that. And that's the same idea, right? It's not about you missing or doing something wrong today. It's just that all that's 0.001%, and then it keeps adding up and it keeps compounding. That takes you from here to all the way on the top, or from top to the bottom, right? And I think that's a very, very important thing. And subhanAllah, like if you analyze the deen and the rulings and the rituals or the pillars of the deen, these habits are like what kind of keeps adding up. And we have from the hadith as well, right? When we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a black dot on the heart. If you repent, it gets away. But if not, then it's just a small dot, but it keeps adding up, right? And then that's how subhanAllah, may Allah protect us from that. So I think that's the fourth component as well. It's just to have some sort of habits that you can continuously and consistently do. And when you look back, you will see great results. Same thing can apply for weight loss, or like weight gains or muscle gains, right? Just having a target of like not going on a crazy diet, which is not sustainable. Even if you do like a half a pound or half a kilo of like weight change or muscle change, I think that's more maintainable, and over a year you'll have like amazing results.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about Muslim success, Zubair, there's another comment here. May Allah reward Zubair. I agree. Mashallah, you're doing some amazing work, bro, for supporting new Muslims and the Dawah in Canada. May Allah reward you and accept it from you. Sticking with the topic of Muslim success, what do we mean by that, right? Because sometimes people understand success by material success, material wealth, being successful in the dunya, right? Being rich. And that's what some people equate success to being. All right. However, from our perspective, is that true? Is there something more to it than that? Is it just that? Is it not? Is it completely opposed to that? What do you mean by Muslim success, Zubair?
Okay, so if you really bring it down to really the basics, right? Then obviously it's we know that man yuti Allah, whoever obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger has indeed been successful, right? So that's the basic premise, right? But that does not mean again, obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not just the establishment of 5 daily prayers. It's the spreading of the deen. It's the feeding of to the poor, right? The feeding of the food. It's bringing comfort to those who are sick. So all these are different ways that you could do that, right? So I think if you were to think about it, as the brother mentioned, having that sort of intention, right? So that's your the foundation of it, and it's actually very important to have it, because you can think about it as a check mark. Yes, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but within the life, and we'll share some examples, it will actually become manifest if the intention was there or not, right? So firstly, obviously having that sort of the basis that, okay, I want to essentially use what Allah has given me to create impact, right? That could be one way of thinking about it. And again, you have a hadith to support that, right? That the no one will be able to move on the day of judgment except they've answered the 5 questions, right? About how they spent their youth and how they spent their time, what did they do with the knowledge, where did they earn their wealth, and where did they spend it, right? So again, these are all resources, right, that Allah has given us, and you are kind of taking those resources and turning them into something else. So now those things could be like, I like to see it as like, okay, you need to have a private component, right, between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the time and the focus and how it's turning into Quran or Salah or Dhikr or Dua. And then the second component is like, okay, well, obviously your family and your parents and so on and so forth. And then what do you want to then, contribute to this place, to this earth, right? And then, finding your passion, right? For some, it's like learning and, teaching. For some, it's like, let's say, da'wah to non-Muslim. For some, it's like new Muslims. For some, it's charity work. For some, it's like, talk shows, whatever it is, right? So you're finding those things. And then I think the key thing is more about effort as opposed to results, right? And I think that's something that's different when it comes to a non-spiritual and non-Muslim mindset, because there it's only about impact, right? For us, it's about effort, right? So again, because someone can say, well, I spent five minutes and I read like 3 pages. And then, for example, some of the people who commented, like, let's say a new Muslim or someone even like, born and raised Muslim, but not someone who's well versed in Quran, they may take 5 minutes and only read 2 lines. Now, if you just take the divine equation out of it, then, you have very less impact. But in the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that the impact is massive. So I think it comes down to efforts for sure. Like, measuring efforts more than measuring impact. To an extent.
I agree. I think there's definitely some truth in that. And I'm glad you mentioned the hadith of the 5 before 5. And the Prophet ﷺ, just for the benefit of the listeners, the Prophet ﷺ said, and I'm going to paraphrase from memory here, take benefit of 5 before 5. Your youth before your old age, your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before you are preoccupied, and your life before your death. And if you can achieve those 5 things, or maximize those 5 things, I guess, then in my view, you're a successful Muslim, right? So let's break it down for a moment, the 5 different points. And I love this hadith, by the way. It's one of the earliest hadith that I studied, and I remember doing khutbahs on it as well. It really is an impactful hadith, and you can get so much benefit from this one small hadith, all right? So if you think about it, the youth, when you're young, you have zeal, energy, effort, strength, enthusiasm, drive. Now you can use that. You can use your youth in a good way or a bad way. You can spend all of that energy and drive in focusing just on the dunya. There's nothing wrong with that. You can use it to focus on learning your deen, even better. You can do it on sins and transgression. Obviously, that's not something that you should be doing, but people will do that. But the Prophet ﷺ said, told us that the young person, this is where real success comes, in my view. And this is just, I'm going to throw this out there, because there's a second hadith which I really, really love, and love reading about and studying. And that's the 7 under the shade of Allah on the Day of Judgment. If you fall under any of those 7 categories, that's success. For me, that is real success. And one of those categories is when the Prophet ﷺ said that a young person who grew up with the worship of Allah will be among the 7 who are granted the shade of Allah, when there is no shade but His. And that's an important one, because I think, and obviously in Islam, if I'm not mistaken, do correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Zubair, in Islam, youth is considered up until the age of 40. You're considered a young person in Islam up until the age of 40. After that, you're considered mature and so on and so forth. But the point is, everyone has time to take advantage of their youth and use it in a good way. Whether you're doing small things and small actions, in Quran learning, etc., or whether you're doing da'wah, or whether you're doing any form of worship, ibadah of Allah, that is something which is, in my view, that's what I would consider successful, because you're creating those habits from a young age. Secondly, the second part of that hadith is health. And this is why it's important that we understand that our bodies are an amana, that we have a responsibility to Allah for this gift that He's given us, that we look after our health. All right? And because it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, the third one is wealth. there's nothing wrong with being rich. There's nothing wrong with earning lots of money and having lots of material wealth, as long as it's halal, of course, and you're able to then have the ability to use that wealth and money in a good way, give charity, pull out, clear people's debts, support the dawah, all of that sort of stuff. You're in a position of strength when you have that. But as long as you earn it halal and you spend it halal, of course, and that's considered success as well. And this is the beauty of Islam, in my view, Zubair, that Islam is a very balanced religion. It's balanced. It doesn't go to one extreme or the other. And this is the Prophet ﷺ is, his hadith are very, very powerful. And this is why I love these two in particular, the 5 before 5 and the 7 under the shade of Allah. They're the two that I really, really benefit from. And that's what I consider success. If you're able to do one of them two or some of them, that's what I consider real success from a Muslim perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think on that front, like as you mentioned, like like none of the the pleasures of dunya are not in general forbidden, right? And we have like obviously examples where people had it, and we have examples of righteous people where they didn't have it. I think it's also important to know yourself as well. Again, for example, for someone like if you open a door to something or a project, like you are getting sucked into it, right? So kind of creating some sort of like elements to protect yourself from it, right? So same thing applies whether it be for fame, status, wealth, women, so on and so forth, right? Knowing yourself, I think, is a really important key, and obviously having some sort of metrics that you can just like evaluate the condition of your heart, right? Where is your heart? Right, are you finding that sort of comfort in things that are important? Are you being distracted? Are you falling and getting closer and closer to haram and what have you? And then creating some sort of means to protect yourself, right? So for example, if you are a person that if you see like opportunities that when you're making or earning income, then it all becomes about income, right? Then the salah are like neglected or later or delayed or combined or what have you. So then you need to make sure that, okay, my boundaries are, are clear, and I'm not going to be able to fall into those sort of things. And beyond that, right, obviously, if you are able to control that and you're able to like earn wealth, then the same thing goes, right? Does that mean that it's going to be just a more luxurious lifestyle for you, or it can be turned into more impact and more, contributions to Islam? Because now you have more resources. So the question is also more, right? And from the hadith of the masakin, that they will be entering like 500 or so years before the rich people, right? So again, so as you mentioned, the five before the 5. So the more wealth you have, the higher accountability, right? The better youth or the more energy you have, the higher accountability. The more knowledge you have, the higher accountability, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So these are some of the things that it's an interesting topic, because we can look at it from different angles. But in your experience, Zubair, as a life coach, what do you find are some of the challenges that people face when they're trying to progress and grow and develop as Muslims? What do you think are some of the key challenges that you've come across? There must be some trends, right, that you see.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So I think we have started talking about a few already, right? So, consistency, habits, right? So habits is a very big thing. Something related to habits is discipline, right? Having a discipline is like super important, right? And again, Islam is about it. And if you also think about it from another example, right? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah. And I think that's a very good thing, right? So you have two things. You have sabr, which is related to discipline and self-restraint and what have you, and that's like absolutely key thing. Right. And, like, even if you look at a lot of non-Muslim work, there's a very good book I recommend people check it out. It's called Discipline Equals Freedom. Right. Discipline equals freedom. And, again, the idea being the same thing, because a lot of time people think, okay, well, and we have this thing, right? When you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're actually freeing yourself. There's another narrative that, I want to free, but you're not freeing yourself. You're actually being slave of your own self, your own desires, and the community and the society. Right, so same thing. So discipline equals freedom, right? And that's one thing. And then the second thing is, ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah, right? The prayers, and that kind of goes back to the point that you can see, right? So, for example, yes, now if you're earning wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but your Jummah is like 1 minute before the last ruku, right? So you can see what's going on there, right? Your sunnah is gone, your Quran is gone, right? You don't spend time with the children, there's no tarbiyah of the children. So now you can't say, oh yeah, I'm doing it sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, I'm talking about the excess wealth, not the basic necessities. So these are some of the things that can really help, right? What is going on with my personal worship? The other element that can also expose issues with sincerity is taking care of the weak, right? So, for example, in Islam, it's different than if you think about like a more secular approach. The people who are weak, are blessing. Allah, paraphrasing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us because of the weak among us, right? So it's not like we're going to be thinking like, okay, people in retirement home and the way that we saw the thought process happening for them when it came to COVID or what have you, resource management. That's not the same thing as in Islam, because for us, taking care of them is a form of blessing, and blessing is basically essentially when 1 + 1 = 11, and it's not 2 or 4 anymore. Right, and that's the whole concept that when you add the Islamic component to productivity, that yes, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the 2 sunnah of the Fajr, are more beloved or more better than the entire world, right? So this is obviously, you can't think from a secular perspective. So this is another component, right? Having this sort of sincerity, taking care of the weak, taking care of the parents and family members and so on and so forth, and being regular with your salah and so on and so forth. There are other things that we can dive into as well.
Yeah, no, there's an interesting comment here. Muslim success equals salah in the early hours, inshallah. So, getting up for tahajjud, that's a form of success, or which will bring about barakah for your day, will bring about success. Praying fajr on time, praying the 2 sunnahs before fajr, and so on and so forth. I agree with this. This is a very important one. Having extra wealth is scary because you'll be vigorously by Allah. That is very true. But, you have to understand that, look, we have a responsibility with our time, our health, our wealth. Though that hadith of 5 before 5 is powerful. Seriously, I recommend everybody to study it properly, inshallah. Okay, any other comments that we've got on there? I have 17 and 15-year-old daughters. How can I make them and myself focus on the Quran, especially when there is the shaitan media and Netflix? what do you think, Zubair?
I think this is interesting. Definitely, it should not be like now this is beyond the age of disciplining, right? So now this is more of the age of showing from the love angle, right? And I'm sure you're able to better comment on this. I would probably think about like thinking about what their stage is, right? And then building knowledge, right? So having either entertaining media, right? So now, alhamdulillah, a lot of Muslim productions are doing very interactive and engaging productions, right? Whether it be on the hadith, things like Riyadus Salihin, the virtues of some action. So I think giving them these things in a small bite size will help them. So as a parent, you would be focused on either environment or study circles or programs that would give them the reward, right? Consistently the reward and punishment sort of thing. Okay, well, if you do this, then you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the concept of Jannah, the hellfire, and so on and so forth. And then let the actions sort of come out of that. And if you have that sort of ability to kind of influence a habit, like a small habit, like in the morning or evening or whatever, we sit down as a family and we read like 5 minutes of Quran tafsir, or watch a Quran tafsir lecture, and that's it. And then we celebrate that, like obviously not being pushing them too much, especially at this age.
That's some good advice. I think one of the things that I will say is we're having kids that age. It is not easy. I'll be honest. It is not as easy as when children are smaller. You have, as a parent, you have more control. You have more authority, if you like. As they grow older and they become more independent, it does become more difficult to be able to encourage certain types of habits and practices. That's why you've got to invest when they're very, very small. Once you've done that, you will see the fruits of it later on as well, inshallah. So I'm just going to be honest with that. There's another comment here. We are, as parents, the ones in control, and we don't have to look at ourselves as being too strict on our children when we take something away from them that they want to do. That's a good point. It is a good point. In the end, we want what's best for them. 100%. I don't think there's any parent who doesn't want what's best for their children in this life and the next life. And we don't have to take away everything at once, but just a half an hour of the time they usually spent on doing something else a day, we'll get them moved into it. Yeah, it's exactly what you said, Zubair. Small chunks. Celebrate those small wins. I think that's what you were mentioning earlier on. Yeah, so I think that's important. Let's talk a little bit about Zubair, about the dawah and the new Muslim support, because I know you're very active and very passionate about the dawah generally, and in particular the new Muslim support, because that links to what we're talking about, Muslim success, especially the new Muslim support element. I think this is one of the key areas that is usually neglected. We've had conversations about this offline many times, and I think we're in agreement that it's one of the areas where it's the most neglected when it comes to the dawah. And it's sad, because it shouldn't be, because my view is this is where the work really starts, when post shahada, right? So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of developing, growing the new Muslims. And you've got extensive experience on this. Share some of those experiences, bro.
Sure. So I think this actually also links with another principle that I wanted to talk about. And this is, again, it's applies to dawah, it applies to anything else. It applies to your home, you're running a hifz school, same thing applies, right? Is to have that sort of clarity of what is the impact, right? And subhanAllah, I see that spoken a lot about at Microsoft. When I'm talking with my manager, you're always talking about impact, right? Because you could be doing a whole bunch of different things, Zubair, at work, but let's focus on things like that will actually increase the impact. So, for example, us, we provide cybersecurity in that scenario, right? So you can do a lot of fancy stuff and cool stuff and whatever. And yes, it's exciting and it will go viral. And this happens in cybersecurity, but there may not be high impact things. So high impact things are small, basic things where you kind of teach people, let's say, to not use same password in multiple sites, have a stronger password, have a two-factor authentication, whatever. So these are all healthy practices. So the reason I'm saying this thing is connected with the Muslim success component is a lot of time we do things and we feel busy, and we feel that we're really busy, but we don't step back and see what is the impact. So one thing that's connected to that, and I recommend people look it up, it's a methodology, it's called OKRs, right? Objective and key results. So what is your objective and what is the result that you are measuring? So obviously, now taking it to the dawah and the new Muslim side, what was happening is, you have to identify the objective first and the key results, regardless of whether you enjoy it or not, whatever, that's a separate question. But what is the objective of your dawah organization? So obviously in the past we have seen it's getting better now. It was a lot about shahada, right? It was about me having intellectual conversations. But the point being that the correlationship between intellectual conversations and debates is not proportional, it's not linear when it comes to those debates or conversations to people actually worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have to be very clear. Is your OKR about the shahada? Is your OKR about the conversations? Is your OKR about the debates? Or is the OKR about your efforts to consistently get people closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So for example, if your goal is, I want, again, we have this from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Mu'adh radiallahu anh, get them to take shahada, right? Which means they understand that, okay, there is no God, la ilaha illallah, wa Muhammadur Rasulullah. So you have that sort of belief. And then the next step is already connected, get them to establish salah, right? Yeah. So now what we have seen in the dawah is we kind of stopped at that point, which was to state the shahada, right? And we didn't focus on salah. Now, I would also be true that, from shahada to salah is the hardest part. It's also the most boring part as well, right? It is boring. It is, it's not as, intellectual. It's not as exciting or as viral, what have you. So that was the reason now, and because we were kind of neglecting that sort of goal, and I think that kind of got diminished. Another thing that also happens, related to the Muslim success component is to not be naive. A lot of time I do see Muslims are very naive. Okay, when I ask, okay, what is the new Muslim challenge? Oh, they're being kicked out of the home. That's probably like 0.001% or 0.01% true, right? So and subhanAllah, I do see sometimes it seems that people are too naive when it comes to the matter of deen, or they're taking the easy way out, Because if you say something like that, then you don't have any responsibility or what have you. But if you think about, like, even there are many scenarios where if the person is being kicked out of the home, it's not because of Islam. It could be because of other issues, regardless of Islam. So that's just another component, tied back to the Muslim success, is to think about OKRs or impact, and also to ask deeper questions. So that's my main thing. And now, so I mean, if I were to say, like, for example, like, this is something very well known for business, right? I mean, now people buy things and then they return it. So same thing is happening, right? When you go to gym, people take membership, they don't come and work out, right? They buy things on Amazon, they return it. I mean, I was kind of, when I started working, I started, one of my second job was a call center, right? And may Allah forgive us for that. It was just like selling, right? Just sell, right? The call center got shut down because our goal was, we would tell the people on the phone, just buy it, and then if you don't like it, you can refund it. Because my metric was I able to sell or not, right? And that was the whole thing. The manager, the whole floor was, focused on selling. Obviously, people would get it. They won't like the product. They would refund it. And then, the business got shut down. But that was the mentality back then. And that's the same thing, right? I mean, we need to think about, like, what is the goal? And if you have the goal, then you would put in the effort and see what's happening with the shahada that I'm seeing and I'm celebrating. Where are those people and why not? And then you kind of dig deeper into that.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. And I think, I don't disagree with that. There's a number of things we can unpack here. And I think there's a number of things that we should talk about with regards to that. Some of the things that you mentioned. I think the OKR bit is very interesting, because sometimes people who are involved in dawah and New Muslim support don't actually have a plan or put out clear objectives of what they want to achieve here. It's like, one of the big gripes that I've always had is, we've got the best product, but we don't have the best salespeople, right? We've got Islam, but we don't have the best people who are going to present Islam in the best way. And when we do get the salespeople who are going to go out there and call people to Islam, then it's sort of like, well, I've done my job, pass it on to somebody else. When they take the shahada, give it to somebody else. It's not my job. I'm just a salesperson, right? And that, for me, is not the most appropriate way of dealing with. Of course, some people specialize in some things when it comes to dawah. Some people specialize in or are very good at New Muslim support. But surely we should have at the back of our mind the whole purpose of dawah, or one of the main reasons for doing dawah, is when somebody accepts Islam, we're ready to pick it up and deal with what you call the boring stuff, what I call the real work, in order to develop the person who's taken their shahada to becoming integrated into our communities. And it is, you have to be consistent with that work. It does take effort and sacrifice, and it is hard. It's not as easy as, in my view, as easy as going to chat somebody about Islam, being the salesperson. The aftercare sales is just as important, if not more important, than the salesperson, right? And I think there is a bit of a mindset issue here that people don't have. And I think that needs to be addressed. That's just my personal view.
Absolutely, 100%, right? So yeah, I think, well, first of all, it's not a sale, right? So sale hasn't happened, right? So you what you have only done is, like, you've registered an interest, I guess. Right? yeah. So you've just registered an interest, like, like you go on a marketing or exhibition, you get people's email or something like that, right? Okay, I'm interested in talking or what have you. Right, so work hasn't happened, and I think as you mentioned, right, it is the real work, it is the hard work, but it also comes down to the other earlier principle we talked about, which is discipline, right? Yes, it's not going to be exciting, and all you need to do essentially in this scenario is to be consistently reaching out to them, right? And obviously in different ways, being in touch, and I think and there is this educational component, again, when I said, like, naivety or, like, not having deep questions. It's very important to understand the problem at a deeper level. Like, a typical New Muslim journey is not like a week or day. It's like, it can be like 6 months to a year. Now, if you drop the ball, again, Allah will guide whoever He wants to guide. But again, the question is, are we putting in the right effort, right? So if you understand that the typical journey takes 3 to 6 months or longer, you need to be consistent for that period of time. And I think that's where it kicks in, right? To sort of understand. And one quick comment I would make is that, look, I mean, even if you take a look at the Meccan period and the Medinan period, the cost of Shahada in the Meccan period was like high. You know, it's not easy to take Shahada in Meccan period, like, because if you have taken Shahada, that means, yes, it's a good sale. You are committed, right? In the Medinan period, that's why we had hypocrites and so on and so forth. You know, there were benefits to taking Shahada.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, I think there's so much to unpack there. Let's look at some of the comments that we've got. May Allah bless you all and grant us the highest ranks of Jannah, and make us amongst those who are steadfast on the deen, and grant us whatever is best on Halfas and Dunya. I mean, that's a beautiful dua. I think there's an ayah in Surah Fussilat, I think it is, if I'm not mistaken. And I think this is an important one that I recommend everybody, again, study. Inna alladhina qalu rabbuna Allahu thumma istaqamu. Istiqama. I think this is, verily those who say our Lord is Allah, those who recognize Allah is our creator, our maintainer, our sustainer, and then they have istiqama upon that. They remain firm and steadfast upon that belief and practice their Islam as they should practice it, i.e. following the Quran and the authenticated Sunnah. This is something that, again, links to Muslim success, what we were talking about earlier. Having istiqama, having firmness upon the deen, especially in this society, in the world that we live in today, where it's full of doubts and half-truths and misconceptions and attacks upon Islam. You know, being steadfast, like the Prophet said, it's like holding on to hot coals, right? This is success for me, Muslim success. If you can hold on to the Sunnah of the Prophet in the times that we are living in today, that for me shows that you've got some form of success as a Muslim, right? And that equally applies to, by the way, not just new Muslims, but those who are born into Muslim families also. It applies to both. Yeah, so this is istiqamah, or steadfastness, is definitely something that is important. Yeah, for Muslim success. What other comments do we have, Sahel? Any other comments that we've got that I've missed out on? I made them listen a lot to Sheikh Imran Hussein's lectures, so they know all shaitan media is there to put a veil over their visions and then forget Allah and to lose God consciousness. I mean, my advice to this, Sister Salma, would be, you know, I think make sure that we are listening to the right people. Make sure that we listen to scholars who are balanced as well. You know, we're living in a society where you can't stop children or stop young people from doing certain things. They're going to be exposed to all sorts of things. And I know your intentions are good when you say this. But, you know, some of the ulama, they tell us, and Zubair touched upon it earlier on, not all media is bad. The TV, the media, social media can be used for good and it can be used for bad. There's some bad stuff on there and you can get some good stuff on there. The internet and so on and so forth. So we have to be balanced in our approach. It's in my view, and this is purely my personal opinion, in my view, it's better to equip young people with, give them the tools to be able to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, so that when they do get exposed to certain things, they're able to, you know, not only distinguish, but make the right choices, inshallah. Because that's essentially what we want to do. We want to develop people who are going to be the next generation, who are going to be steadfast upon their deen and to know how to deal with the challenges that they're faced with. What do you think, Zubair? What are your thoughts on that, from that comment just there?
Yes, I think that was a very good point that you mentioned there. I think so. What I would say in this scenario is, like, I think sometimes also we have to be able to relatable, right? So this is kind of goes back to that same principle of, like, you know, having a deeper understanding, right? So a lot of time, like, yes, you know, many times the youth may say or do stupid things, or they may be very superficial or what have you. But at the same time, we need to be able to engage with them at a deeper level. And either there's two ways, right? Being able to sort of, like, you know, understand what they are exposed to, what they're doing, right? So either you need to, you know, again, keep up, read, be able to understand those arguments and so on and so forth, or find environment where it could be like, other brothers or, community programs or what have you in the city that can actually engage them at that level. Because if we just take this thing, well, yeah, hey, you know what, this is all, garbage, it's propaganda and so on and so forth, they will see through this, right? They will, either they will not agree or they'll just say yes, but they won't respect that opinion. So I think having that sort of either yourself or finding someone else who can do that, so they can actually see, like, they're able to, like, but even like sometimes, for example, like, when we talk about dawah, a lot of time these arguments against Islam are presented in a very articulated manner, as if that, it's a great deep point. But people who are able to dissect, they can say, like, this itself has no foundation and it's is really, really weak. So yeah, that's what I would say is, for example, so not just just giving them like some lecture. Yeah, is try that and also see if they are actually able to relate to it. If they're not relating to it and you can relate to it, I can relate to it, but they're not related to it, that's fine. That means that I need to acknowledge this and I need to find a better option.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is the important thing. We do understand what the young people are going through as well. It's difficult. I have to say, it is not easy. It is difficult, but alhamdulillah, we can make dua and we can try our best, and that's all we can do.
And
yeah, go for it, Zubair. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna head out for Maghrib, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, and it's really beneficial.
We're gonna wrap it up there, inshallah. Yeah, we're going to wrap it up there. So that's the end of the program. Jazakallah khair, Zubair, for joining us. Inshallah, it was a good, productive program for people to benefit from. I'll be back tomorrow, inshallah, and I'll be talking to our beloved brother, Ustad Ilyas Karmani, about Islam and mental health. So make sure you tune into that, and we'll be back at the same time, midnight UK time, on Newcastle Fast FM on the Muslim Geordie podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.